Well, good morning. We're here with a buddy of mine, Shane Robson. We've known each other now. Our relationship spans over a couple of decades. Firstly, we met in the military, played rugby together, did all that together, and now we're sitting down here to talk about what you've achieved in a relatively short time. Probably seems like a long time for you, but
it does.
In the scheme of things, you've now built yourself a successful business investing in property and education. Before we dive right into that, how are you feeling about the year ahead? And thanks for being here this morning too.
My pleasure, Brodie. It's funny that you say we've known each other over 2 decades. I think it's been 3. If you think about it, it's a new decade now, which is good. 2020, it's a new decade, it's a new year. Everything's looking really good with regards to property on a macro level here in southeast Queensland. Looking back at 2019, there was a few hiccups. A bit of sort of insecurity with consumer confidence around the election and a few other things like that. We had the fires at the end of the year, so a lot of people took their finger off the trigger in investing through the uncertainty around that. But with all that behind us, 2020, new decade, moving forward, heaps of new infrastructure projects here in southeast Queensland. Sydney and Melbourne, not declining too badly, not tanking, but they're having a bit of a downturn or a bit of a period in their cycle. So we're seeing a lot of people who would be buying in Sydney either as an owner occupier who can't afford to live in Sydney, so they're moving up here now, or as a traditional investor who would buy a $500,000 or $600,000 property in Sydney or Melbourne, are priced out of the market, so they're sending their dollars up here, which is giving us a great supply and demand effect. So it's good.
That's good.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to 2020.
I might ask some dumb questions because I'm going to enjoy this because I'll actually learn a lot.
Sure.
So for the benefit of for people listening, a lot of what you do is education based for people wanting to get into the market. You got a passion for obviously your military past,
sure,
and helping young military guys get in the market, which can seem like such a distant idea. You try to close the gap with your education. Tell me a bit about what you do around finding someone who's not even ready to watching that process and seeing them celebrate their first investment.
Yeah, sure. So the main thing around why I do what I do, the educational piece, is we do a nationwide tour every year, 2 or 3 times, going around the different Navy, Army, Air Force bases, and just do a workshop, which is Property 101, just the basics. And that's something that I think that all people should know as a precursor to investing in property. Like, I won't go to someone and go, this is a property, buy it because I say so. Anyone who does that, there needs to be some sort of education behind it. And I think that it's not taught in schools. My father didn't teach me about it, so about investing and building towards your future. So I think it's a key fundamental, and it's in our structure. The way that we work at Robson Property, my company, is first we learn, and then we strategize, and then we move through the process of earning your first property. And I get guys, unlike most agents, who won't spend a dime or any time on someone who's not transactional ready to invest. As a business position, it's really good for my longevity in business that I've built up a pipeline of guys who I've nurtured from the get-go. So it makes sense business-wise, but also passion-wise, to see a guy come to a show who's got $0 and knows nothing about property. And we're at the stage now where those guys have come along 5 years ago, invested 3 years ago, and are now knocking on the door for their second property. It's a great feeling. It's awesome. And that's where, from the business side of things as well, you start getting a lot of traction. People do start telling the good stories. Not only did I buy a property off Robbo, or I invested with Robbo, it's like, look, I've got a great result and I'm doing it again. That's when people really start to take notice, and that's a big reward. At the end of the day, I see myself in 10 or 15 years' time hanging out with my guys who invested at the start. Yeah. And they're happy, and they say thanks. When it's all done and done, like that's where we're looking for. Big picture is a good result for my guys. Which is so good on the Gold Coast, because the Gold Coast has a bit of a side to it where I guess there's a whole get rich quick. I know you don't sell that. Yeah, I know I've been through the process of property with you before, and I know it was never get rich quick now. This is going to work, and it was actually quite calculated and very specific. You told me when I could and when I couldn't, and it was really good. Tell me a little bit about I know all the bad stuff to your military background. Tell me about how long were you in the military? Purse file this thick. How long were you in the military? Just to give some, I guess what I wanted to do here is, because I know your background, and
I guess I trust your business that you've built. And I know that my age group, a lot of people in my age group and people who will watch this, who this is a way that they can learn to invest.
Sure.
And so what I wanted to do was really build the idea that, hey, you're approachable. You're not this weird shiny thing behind a laptop screen that looks like you can take all the money. Tell me about your past, because you've been doing this over 5 years now. But the military, where'd that start?
So I got out of high school, did year 12, only hung around in year 10, 11 and 12 to play rugby, pretty much.
Exactly the same as us, yep.
Should have probably jumped out after year 10 and got a job, but then after my parents, God bless them, paid all of this money for school.
Mm-hmm. Are you private school?
I flunked, yeah, big time.
Flunked private school.
Flunked. And I was really good up until year 9. I was in advanced maths and all the rest of it, and then I found skateboards and girls and just didn't study. So, and my father was a real cerebral guy. He lectured at uni. He was an optometrist, all the rest of it. So he couldn't figure me out. He's like, what's wrong with this kid? But then I went from the Byron Bay for about 3 years, working as a dish piggle behind the bar. So surfing and snowboarding and having a great time. And it wasn't until I got home and sort of flaked out at my parents' house, moved back into the bedroom I grew up in. Dad was like, nah, not a chance, mate. You're not just coming back here and bumming around. So we, and he was actually an Army reservist for 6 years. Whilst doing uni or whatever he was doing when he was younger. So he goes, you're joining the military. And I said, not a chance in the world. And we went back and forth locking.
How old were you then?
20.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I joined when I was, 20, 21. So he won. Rocked up down at Liverpool Street in Sydney, and I got on the bus, and that's the end of it. After, I think I tried to be something in the army, but they weren't taking them, avionics technician in the army or something. But they said, we're taking Navy engineers. And I said, okay. So that's how I ended up in the Navy. That was in 2001. Loved it as a young guy before, marriage and kids and all the rest of that sort of stuff, traveling around the world and hanging out with your mates. Yeah. We'd go find somewhere like Singapore, and there'd be 20 of us all stepping together. Yeah. And it was amazing, great times. Didn't get into much trouble.
Didn't get caught.
I remember Terry Patterson was our recruit school chief, and the first thing he said to us when we just got up into the blocks, in Waller Division I was, in recruit school, and he just goes, in this outfit, you can do whatever you want, just don't get caught. Yeah. Don't front me, I don't want to know. Yeah. Don't get caught, because I'll run you in, and I don't want to do that, don't get caught. So we lived by that, and we got away with everything.
We did. It's changed now.
It is. It's different. Changed. It is. Heaps of fun to be had. I was an engineer, so stoker. Yeah. 12 years, got out as a Kellic, MSM, Marine Systems Manager. Was lucky enough to play in the league and union teams, represent the Navy at both, travelled the world with Ranru.
No, I actually remember our last game of rugby we played together.
Where was that?
I think it was in Sydney.
The Mons Cup?
I was playing... I think it was union.
Yeah, you were 5'8" and I was 12.
Because you got your head taken off by my pass. I gave you a cut out pass, and a bloke had hired you, and that was the last time we played together. You went off the field. First time I've ever seen you off the field like that.
Yeah, right.
It's a good times.
Well, I can't remember that because I was probably concussed.
Yeah, that's it.
I do remember that day though. That was at in Bondi.
That's right.
Yeah, in Sydney. So I was really lucky in that regard. Had a great career, had heaps of fun, did a couple of deployments to the Middle East, which was enjoyable. Used those funds to buy properties, the first couple of properties. So that all worked out. But in general, my overall feeling towards being in the military was it was a great time. It gave me a lot of the things that I needed, integrity and all those sort of things. Like you talk about the 5 key virtues of the military. We all laugh at it when we hear it, but
it's taught us a lot though, moving forward.
It has, and I tell everyone that I meet in business and otherwise that I was in the military. I'm really proud of that. I think a lot of people, like you said, a good point that you made is out here in the Gold Coast, there's plenty of sharks in every industry. And I came from a world which was integrity, which is the military. Like, can you stay back and help me after work? Yeah, no problems, because I know that you'll help me next time. There's no money exchange. There's no favours or anything like that.
There's no double time.
There's no and you're not getting paid any extra by the Queen either.
You owe me a beer.
But then going from that world of integrity and landing in first was I bought a beauty salon. I got ripped off there as well, but that's another story altogether. But coming out into this world where you just naturally assume it's in our demeanour and it's in our culture to trust and do the right thing by people.
Yeah.
Out here, it's not the case. You know, not everyone. There's plenty of good operators, but there's some real dodgy ones as well. So, you know, that's what's, you know, I'd like to think that was a natural trait of mine to be honest and have integrity, but I also think it's been drilled into us after years in the military. So, you know, some of our, cohorts and things that we got up to in the military were really good fun. It also gave us a lot of backbone as well. So,
you always had aspirations to go into business. I think what happens to people in the military, those who decide they want to get out, the military does two things to you. You enjoy your time there, and then you can't wait for that change. After you've had enough and had a gut for or whatever. Some people just they build a really successful career there. I decided when I wanted to get out, I really wanted to. I guess because about the military, you feel you can only ever grow so far. You can see the end, and even though the end is could take you 25 years to get there, the fact that you can see it means, well, that's my ceiling.
That's the cap. Yeah,
that's the cap. And so when I wanted to get out, even though it might have taken me 10 years now until even I probably still haven't reached the success of what they would, I know that I can go further because you can't see it. So I know you had aspirations to get into business. What was the first business you dove into when you left?
So it actually took about 3 years to decide that I wanted to get out of the Navy. I went from being on HMAS Parramatta for 4 years, and then went to the dive school. As a recompression maintainer. And if anyone knows the dive school, it's where all the clearance divers do their course. So being an instructor there, even though I wasn't a diver, I was a stoker on all the bits of kit with the recompression chamber. I was still an instructor at the school, and I ran an instructor's sort of lifestyle, which was not the Navy. It was at Balmoral Beach, walking around in my boardies half the day. My planned maintenance got done on a Monday, so the rest of the week was really cruising.
Lifestyle.
Then got posted out of there back to sea. And then as I walked on board the ship, at that moment when the smell of the diesel and the oil hit my face as I went down the 2-deck ladder bay down from the hangar down to 2-deck on Stewart, HMAS Stewart it was, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I was at that point, and it took me 3 years to figure it out. Well, not to figure it out, but it took 3 years to build myself up into a position where I could get out, and that was by doing courses via correspondence. I got my certificate for them, my diploma in finance broking, as well as my RG146 financial planner certificate, because I was going to be a planner or a broker.
Gosh, I can remember you doing that.
And I was telling everyone, and the reason why I was telling everyone is because that manifested. If I tell everyone I'm doing this,
you got to do it.
I was even in the mess with a good friend of ours, Chris Downey. And we'd be in there reading car magazines or Ralph magazines, whatever. And all of a sudden, I started bringing down property investor magazines. He's like, "What's this crap?" And I was like, "I'm going to start my own company." And he's like, "Whatever." So I knew that by planting that seed and by telling everyone, it would sort of hold me accountable. However, spanner in the works, a fork in the road that I decided to go down was to buy into a franchise first. A lot of my buddies had really good success and still do with buying into gyms, Anytime Fitnesses, things like that, F45s, all this sort of stuff. So I approached one of my buddies and said, "What have I got to do to buy a gym?" And he said, "Mate, I've actually been looking at another business in the beauty industry."
Makes sense.
What do I know about beauty? I'm like, I think back and I'm like, why the heck did I do that? What was I thinking? But anyway, it was a business that the franchisor was an ex-Navy guy, really personable guy, real good salesman, put me into this business. I spent cash to do it. And I learned a lot of lessons. It basically went broke. It was a poor business model, and it fell over. It cost me 6 figures. Taught me a lot of lessons about business, i.e., for me, it was a bad idea to be in a franchise when 10% of gross goes out the window before you sell. If it was in a Westfields, high overheads, young staff, male or female, doesn't matter. Young staff are flaky. They call in sick. Every weekend we'd have at least 1 or 2 call in sick. It's like, what do you mean you're calling in sick? It's Saturday. You're just hungover. I know you are. And from where we were when we were in the Navy, no such thing as calling in sick because you're hungover. You just get to work. So that didn't compute. Having stock in trade, doing procedures to people's faces, having high insurances, all these things taught me that I need to be in a business where I'm...
Well, you know something about it.
I know something about it. Where I know something about it. But basically become a consultant. And just, have less of these things that can go wrong, but also know something about it. Exactly right. And
before you go further, I want to go back. You mentioned you lost 6 figures.
Yeah.
Just because people watching might, they're probably looking to go into business. How did you come across 6 figures? Did you borrow from a business point of view? Did you borrow money or?
No. Well, it was actually the hardest part of it all was that it was actually left behind as an inheritance by my parents.
Okay.
So that's what burred me up even more. Mum and Dad both had cancer and both passed away at about the same time.
Yep.
And they left behind some money, and it's been a thorn in my side ever since. That when Dad sort of passed away, he said, "Go buy a house with this." So I sort of did half and half of what he said. I put down a deposit for a home, but also bought into this business, which ended up wiping that out. So that's part of the burn that's underneath me to succeed in business, is to pay back this debt that I sort of
put on yourself.
I put on myself, yeah. So
is this tie into the drive and passion
absolutely
behind? Yeah.
Well, it's part of it. It makes up a big part of it. I've come to peace with it all, because we're in a position now. But at the start, I had a massive debt on my soul for not doing the right thing. Well, not doing the right thing, but by having a crack, and it fell down, and I felt that I owed my parents something if they were up there watching. That was tough. That was losing money's money, man. But when there's an emotional attachment or something like that behind it as well, that was very, very hard to deal with.
And it's perceived as well, because reality, your parents were probably happy that you were showing some initiative and having a crack.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of failure that generally, it's only a failure if you stop.
Yeah.
So the fact that you kept going,
that's right.
You're using it now for a positive reason to keep reaching further and further, which is great, which is so good. So you failed at being a beautician.
Miserable. You should have seen the look on the boys' faces when they see me popping up on Facebook and the rest of it. You did what? You put a beauty salon, and I was managing the thing. Could you imagine me standing at the front desk of a beauty salon?
It sounds like the customers can't imagine either.
It was 50-50 on the sort of, some of the ladies and men weren't too happy with a guy like me standing on the front desk and talking about sort of, we did waxing and IPL and.
You did waxing?
Not myself personally. Part of the training was I had to do it. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Oh
I'm competent in everything that we were doing, even down to skin needling, which is a horrible thing to do to your face, but people do it. But yeah, so I went through all the training and I did all the procedures, and then I might have anybody come and talk about getting a procedure done to one of their intimate parts of their body, and I'm just being professional, of course, but it didn't go down too well. Some of the ladies didn't want to talk to me about it.
I bet.
I actually got fired from running my own salon by my business partner at the time. It was a really menial task. In each treatment room, we had to fold the towels up a certain way and leave it on the massage bed or whatever it is on the procedure table. And again, I was a stoker, so I was used to training young engineers, and then I was also, for a time, instructing at the dive school, so I'm teaching young military guys how to do things. And this young 19-year-old girl, who was a really gentle person, really nice person, but she wasn't doing the task right, and I flipped out. This is how we fold the towels, and I'm showing you how to do it. And she's in tears, and I'm like, why are you crying? This is a professional environment. Yeah. Well, I've got the door closed on one of these small little rooms, and she's in the corner, and I'm like, what's happening? Why is she reacting like this? But again, then I had to look at myself in the mirror briefly, and I was very angry about she wasn't folding the towels right, so it wasn't the right environment for me to be working in anyway. That could be part of the reason why it failed. I don't know.
I love it. That's good. I love that you're a normal person.
Oh, mate. Yeah.
So you've moved on from the beauty industry. Now, up in this point, you'd actually bought and sold some property in while you were in the Navy, right? So when did you buy your first property? How old were you?
It was going back a while. So I did my first golf trip, and pretty much threw that money at the bar.
Yep.
As we all do when we're younger, and so that taught me some lessons about having some money. When you do a golf trip or a 6-month deployment to the Middle East, you come back with about 30 or 40 grand. Yeah. Depending on how crazy you went in Dubai. Yeah. So the first one, the money just came and went. Various holidays and different things.
Tattoos.
Tattoos. Yeah. Tattoos. And then the second one was in about 2008. Bought my first property.
Yep.
And that was a hard lesson learned as well. The first 2 properties that I bought whilst I was in the military was off a marketing firm that was purporting to sort of do the same work that I do. However, they were just a sales division for one builder, who had no say in when in the property cycle of the city that they were building in, or what they were delivering. So I got led down the garden path on that one as well. As a young guy, bought 2 investment properties over in Perth at the top of the property cycle over there, and that sort of taught me a lot of lessons.
Just expand that for people, including myself. When you say you bought at the top of the property cycle, explain what you mean by that.
So as an investor, you should be able to tell me around the country on a macro level. When I'm talking about macro, I'm talking about states and large cities, where they sit on the property clock. Now, the property clock, as you know, property is cyclical. There's different things that affect the capital growth cycle of any one property, and that can come down to population growth, supply, infrastructure projects that are being brought on in the area. All these sort of things go towards the capital growth of that area, and you can sort of tell it's usually a 7 to 10 year cycle. So you get 7 years worth of growth and then 3 years worth of cooling down. Sydney at the moment is at the top of a declining period, whereas here in southeast Queensland, I think we're at the bottom and the start of a really good capital growth period due to all the infrastructure and population growth and everything that's happening. So I bought after 7 years of capital growth in the Perth market because I didn't know about
You were advised?
I was advised to buy a property in Perth because it was a good time to buy. So I bought 2 over there, 4x2 homes. And they've both actually declined in value ever since. We're seeing Perth is getting towards the bottom of their market now. So I'm not selling them, got to hold on to them or I'll take a loss. But that taught me a lot of lessons, again, about who you can trust and who knows what they're talking about. Just because someone says something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they mean it. And I made that mistake in the first 2 properties that I purchased.
So it's over... This company that advised you to, say, buy over in Perth, you were living in Sydney?
I was living in Sydney. I was in the Navy at the time. So that's another good... And they're not wrong in saying to buy in another city that you don't live in.
That's an important piece of information, yeah.
Exactly right. So it wasn't a bad idea to buy in Perth. It was just a bad idea to buy in Perth then. With regards to the property cycle, I speak to a lot of guys who say I want to buy an investment property in Wagga Wagga because I grew up there. Not that Wagga Wagga's good or bad, but that's their reasoning. Or I live in Sydney now, so I want to buy a property in Sydney here so I can drive past it and check on it. It's like, no, that's what a property manager's for. You don't need to worry about that. So everything that we teach at Robson and Robson Property, although we're very heavy on southeast Queensland now, in 2 years, 3 years' time, we might not be. We'll probably be looking at Perth, honestly, because they're, again, at the bottom of their cycle. So there's a couple of key points that I talk to my guys about where to invest and when to invest. And, you know, especially if you're in the military, if you buy within your locality, you're going to lose your RA or your DHA house. So buying outside of your locality to keep your Navy entitlements is really important too. So, again, just because you're living in Sydney doesn't mean you should invest there. So we look at investing around the country. We call it rent vesting, actually. So you're renting where you are. And if you're in the military, it's a really great...
good model.
A good model to be on. So you're paying... $200 or $300 a week to live in, or it might be a little bit more now, live in a fantastic home in Sydney. Don't lose your entitlements and buy something in Sydney, especially now that we're at that stage of property clock with Sydney anyway. Buy up in Queensland and get capital growth and keep your entitlements when you're living in Sydney. So,
and the reason Shane mentioned that, people watching going, who's paying that much for rent? That's because your Navy income might be, say, medium, but they get, subsidies for rent and stuff, which allows them, if they bought a property, they actually lose that subsidy, but your wage is still kind of below average in a way. So it's just, that's more specific for people in the military who are looking to invest. Good lesson learned. How do you think the markets... I know you've told me this before, there's no such thing as Australian market. It's markets.
You listened.
I listen.
Good.
I listen. Where's a hot spot right now?
If someone was to come to me and say, Shane, where should I invest?
Yeah.
I think southeast Queensland on a macro level, and then we're looking at 2 markets within it, the Sunshine Coast, with Maroochydore being the central hub. They've slated a $4 billion, and it's happening right now. The earthworks are happening. There's a $4 billion project which is the key centrepiece of the Sunshine Coast reinvigoration. So they've looked at the Sunshine Coast Council has looked at, we need a CBD because we're growing. It used to be a sleepy town where people used, or a sleepy region where people used to go to retire. It's no longer the case. The population growth moving into the area because of mining in Queensland, because Sydney and Melbourne have priced people out of the market. Everyone's moving to the Sunshine Coast, so they've thought we need to build a CBD to facilitate all this new population. It's $4 billion. It's called the Mixed Use Precinct. It used to be the 18-hole golf course just over the back of Sun Plaza. That's now earthworks, commercial, residential, entertainment precinct. It's going to be similar to something like Darling Harbour,
right?
You know, with restaurant precincts, entertainment, all the rest of it. That's right there in Maroochydore. We're seeing the new light rail line linking north to south, as well as the hard rail, going the whole length of the Sunshine Coast. The new data submarine cable that's bringing the fastest internet to the country is coming through the Sunshine Coast. The hospital upgrades, airport upgrades, there's jobs coming into the area. It's going to be the greatest growth story I think we've seen in the country for a long time. So that's where I'm really, really heavy on, is house and land around Maroochydore, as close in to Maroochydore as possible.
Do you have a portfolio up there?
Yeah,
stock
absolutely.
Up there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can see that on my website. So yeah, we've acquired a lot of stock over the Christmas period. Obviously, our industry slows down a bit. People are going on holidays and recouping from the year. So then we haven't had as many transactional guys coming through. So I use this time to get out and meet with developers and builders and find out what's coming on next. So we've acquired about 4 or 5 new projects in the Sunshine Coast.
Awesome.
So it's a really strong picture. I really like Gold Coast as well. We sort of steer clear of the glitter strip, obviously, but the Gold Coast is waking up. It's no longer a tourist town. It used to be a one-horse town. Something that's really really key, and what I do as well is when you talk about investing in an area, you've got to be cognizant of what drives capital growth and rental yield in that area. I know that people in the past have been pretty heavy on buying in mining towns, and that's a bad idea.
That seems crazy to me.
It does.
It can come and go.
The yields are so large, you know, because there's an influx of all these guys moving into town, but if the mine goes broke, then you're left with a property that no one wants to live in. So same with tourist towns. The Gold Coast is notorious, or was, for being a tourist town. You know, the first thing that people cut away if there's a dip in the economy or there's a recession, people don't go on a holiday. So that always made the Gold Coast property market a bit stagnant. That's no longer the case. We're sort of morphing into a part of Brisbane. Brisbane's growing exponentially, so is the Gold Coast with it. It's sort of the whole southeast Queensland region, and I talk about Sunshine Coast, Brisbane, Gold Coast, and out to Toowoomba. The whole area is just exploding at the moment.
I've got a question for you. Now, I'm fairly uneducated on your industry, but for some reason I've always thought the last 18 months, if I was to buy an investment property somewhere close now, I would, me personally, just by my infinite lack of wisdom in it, I would buy somewhere like Logan. I'm talking a long-term investment, right?
Sure.
Because I feel that over time, the gap between Robina and Brisbane and all that will close. Sure. And so what would be a very good low purchase?
Sure.
As long as, you know, you can get a rental in there that's not going to destroy the whatever.
That's a really key point. Go on.
Okay. So I feel like that would be, you could probably spend $400, $450 in there. I'm talking a house, not a unit.
Yep.
Keep it in Logan, but 15-year plan. Sure. Now, put that against, you can answer whether that's would work or not. Put that against a 6-7 year plan against somewhere that you've handpicked. How would they compare that mindset?
Sure.
Is it safer to look at 15 years where it's probably going to happen?
Yep.
Or 6-7 years more aggressive, but you've put in the work behind it?
So having a good strategy and doing the research can bring. I talk about property. There's about 4 answers that I need to correctly answer this question.
I love a long-winded question.
Well, I can talk all day. So when we talk about property is a medium risk, medium return investment. So there's shares, which are high risk, high return, and then there's putting your money in the bank, which is low return but low risk.
Yeah.
If we strategize and we really delve into markets and who the construction companies, the builder, and all this sort of stuff, you can bring your risk down and your returns up. So you were looking at a 15-year plan where you just sort of
sit and wait,
or a more aggressive plan. So then I'll go on to the next point, which is Logan. Two key points with Logan. So when I talk about investing, you've got to take into consideration land content.
Yep.
So how much land there is on the Gold Coast to develop? Not much. So that area between Brisbane and the Gold Coast is a really great location for you to invest in. As Jacob's Well and the rest of the Gold Coast gets swallowed up, we're bound by the mountains in the west, the ocean in the east, and then there's the thin strip of land that's going up to Brisbane. So the land is finite, which gives it greater value. So the less land there is, the more it's worth. So as these last developments get chewed up or get absorbed into the market, you're going to see an increase in capital growth. The point that sort of goes against it when you're talking about that area at the moment is gentrification is happening, but it hasn't quite happened completely yet. There's places in there where you can purchase a good new property, whether you're going to get the rental yield in Logan and get good tenants that, like you said, don't trash your place. But it's a good plan if you're going to look at buying at a lesser value and hold it for 15 years. Like pretty much my model with buying property is you buy it now and you hold it until retirement. Actually, I'll take that back. That's a model that we talk about for first timers. Is we look at buying a property and holding it for a very long period of time. I think that property. This is getting off track, but
that's right.
So property can be in two phases. You buy your first portfolio of properties while you're rent vesting, like we spoke about. Once you've hit the magic number of what you want to spend on your own home, cash in the lot, buy your own home.
Gotcha. Yep. Safe.
Yeah. Then you're in your own home.
Yeah.
And you've been renting, living where you needed to live for your work. You're not buying something and paying off the mortgage your whole life and stuck to that property. It's hard to get in and out of. So we rent vest. We get a portfolio of property working for us. When we get to the dollar value that you want in equity to buy your own home, you buy it. And then you start your second run of property. And that first run of property needs to be geared towards capital growth. So high on capital growth. So all your due diligence is done around.
So that's the potential for its immediate area to grow, right?
Yeah, that's right. So you want a capital growth portfolio which is growing. So then you sell that, and then you do your second run of investment properties after you've owned your own home, which is high yield because you want to start generating a passive income.
So you go more aggressive on that. Is that what you're saying?
On the yield. So you want a property that's high rental yield, and it's kind of. I try to find the happy medium between.
Just keep that there so I can catch what you're saying.
Sorry, mate. Yeah. I try to keep the happy medium between having a high yield and high capital growth, but you can go for either or. A high rent area where you're not getting the capital growth as much. So that's a strategy that I'm employing, that I want to employ, is to build up enough equity in my first run of properties to buy my own home with cash, and then move on to a retirement piece. But going back to what you asked about the 15-year plan and the 7-year plan, it all comes down to how much time and effort you have in doing the research. But that's where we come in.
Yeah, gotcha.
So we can do that research for you. And when I'm not in front of my clients talking to guys like yourself about the actual transactional stuff, that's where we're spending all of our time, is out in the market finding where we're going to get the best capital growth. Our model for our young guys is, unlike these guys that are on the front page of Property Investor magazine, look at this kid, he bought 15 properties in 10 years. The reason why he's on the front cover of the magazine is because it's rare. He's either got lucky, he's got huge balls and was happy to get into a really big debt position, or he had a fallback position of some help, rich parents, or maybe he was a really high income earner. So and there's those guys who say, like you said at the start, the get rich quick guys, buy 10 properties in 10 years, I'll show you how. And that's by buying property one. If you've got some growth in year 2, pull the equity out, buy your second property. And it's got to be a really good strategy, or they got lucky to be able to pull equity each time. We don't teach that. If you buy a property one in year 1, buy property 2 by pulling the equity out of that, and buy the third one in year 3, and there's a downturn in the market, all of a sudden you've got 3 properties that are severely upside down. Yeah, the
They're
properties
all
are
negative geared, and
Yep, and you might fall over, not have the funds from your job
to cover
to maintain all of these mortgages, which are now, you might owe $1.2 million on a portfolio of property that's only worth $800 now. Whereas we do it, I think, the smart way and the safe way by mitigating as much. Rich, you buy your first property in year 1, and then I teach my young guys how to save money. Save 15 or 20 grand per year and buy your second property.
Hang on. You're teaching saving money.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
I don't think people do that anymore.
It's a key fundamental for young guys to understand the value of the money that you're getting, especially if you're in the military. Just say you do a deployment, you're 19 years old, you're on 100K. Your base wage is 60, your seagoing's 10, and then you come home with 30K. That's 100 grand for a 19-year-old to have. If you're not taught the lessons of what that money's worth, you'll let it go. And like we all did when we were young.
I did for 6 years, yeah.
100%. Right. What did I have? I had a brand new GT Forester, lived in an apartment in Bondi, was living the life every weekend because
heaps of tattoos.
Heaps
of good nights out.
Heaps of good nights out that I can't really remember.
Yeah.
But that was it, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. Let these young guys know that you guys are in a position while the rest of the country is at uni, at TAFE, working behind a bar, or not knowing what they're going to do with their life. You just made 100 grand. If you make it count, and I'm not saying, be boring and not have a life, but there's got to be a trade-off. So 15 grand of that you've earned that year, put that into a savings plan. So in year 4, you buy your second property.
Year 4, yep.
You haven't touched any of the equity in the first one. And then again, 15 grand a year, and in year 6 or 7, you buy your third one. So you should have had 6 years growth in the first, 3 years worth of growth in the second, and then you buy your second one.
So first property, I'm just going to slow it down.
Yep.
Because this is like, this.
I know.
You know it, so I'm going to slow you down. So first year, you've saved up, you've got your deposit, someone's let your money, whatever, you've bought your first house.
Yes.
When you buy your second house in the 4th year,
yes,
you're not using the equity. You've actually saved the deposit.
You've saved the deposit.
So this
again.
is standing alone now. You're not touching equity, so you're not over borrowing.
Yep.
So you're basically not doing what everyone used to do.
Yeah.
Because I remember that it came in like everyone was like, "Oh, I got 6 mortgages." I'm like, "How'd you do that?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm just borrowing," and it was all interest only loans and stuff like that. And then stuff happened. It was like, "Oh, I left the Navy. I haven't got any of those. I'm broke.
Yep,
I got a black mark." So yours, I like the idea of each home. At some point, do you go back and use the equity on the first home?
So that's where we get to. We've got 3 properties now.
Yep.
It's been 7 years.
Yep.
We've saved up for all the deposits. We haven't touched any equity in any of them. And if we've done our job and the due diligence was right, property 6 should have a really good bit of equity, some growth.
The first property.
Gotcha. And the second one also, but the first one in year 7, okay, we'll pull some equity out of that one. So you can actually get in year 7 your 4th property, in year 8 from the second property, pull out equity of that one. So you can have almost 10 properties in 10 years, but we're setting it up in the first 6.
First 6 are very
calculated.
calculated.
6 years, the safe way.
Right.
So it's taking the risk out of it. It's teaching young people how to save their money. It's doing it the right way. It's not putting them at risk. Like I'm taking this back to my community. Like it's not just a market or a whatever. I don't want to be able to not go to an Anzac Day march in 5 years' time because I sold people some crap properties.
True. Yeah.
It's an important part of my life, not just a business thing. So although I teach, I've got to practice what I preach.
Yeah.
Basically, I can't just say I'm going to teach you how to do investment property and then actually perform it the wrong way by putting these guys at risk. So it's got to be a really strategic setup where they do it the right way. And then in years down the track, then you've got an equity position with your first 3 properties. So you are going to get more sophisticated, and one day you'll fly the coop, you won't need me anymore, and that's fine too. But at least it's set up the right way, and we've mitigated as much risk. No one's got a crystal ball, but we've mitigated the risk as much as possible for these young guys and girls.
So given all that, what if I now want to buy a beauty salon instead? Don't do it.
Spat my water all over your microphone. I'll do it if you want, but
that's funny. When's your next? Oh, by the way, I'll put all of Shane's details in the link. I just spilt water all over myself as well. I'll have all of Shane's details in the bios and the links and stuff too. And I recommend him. I've been down this road with him and spoken to him. at length about all this stuff. What are you guys doing differently this year? I mean, how do you, for someone who's never started, what's the difference between someone who invests and who doesn't?
Yeah, and it's taking action. It's just we do each year go around the country. We do our workshops, educational pieces for people, and I ask them who's a serial seminar or workshop attendee, and some people put their hands up and I said, what have you done about it? Like you can educate yourself, and it's very important to educate yourself, but at some point you need to pull the trigger. And I look back over the last year, and I was talking to Rebecca about it yesterday, like we need to get through to these people, the guys who have educated themselves to a point, they are in a position to do it, but because of last year, the election, the bushfires, whatever reasons they had not to pull the trigger, are you going to be at the end of 2020 and be thinking, oh, I didn't do it again?
In the same position.
You know, and it does. I remember buying my first property, and it was a leap, and it was something that was really, the consideration was in depth, and it was, am I doing the right thing? But you just got to do it. You can't just sit back and not do anything.
I suppose a notable point too, sorry to cut you off, is that your first one failed.
Yeah.
And the reality is
the first two
failed, and you've actually come out of it. So it's also good to let people know that, hey, if you've been burnt before, there is another way, and so many people do it well. So if they're willing to reach out, I'd also add that you don't have to pay Shane for a meeting. No. He actually is just a normal guy who wants to see someone get amongst it and have a crack.
Absolutely.
You might have to pay for the 10th meeting if they don't go anywhere, but reach out, say hello, and get mentored. What's different about your business this year that separates you from, say, other people in the same industry? It's
the time. I'm willing to put time into guys and educate them. We're going to be doing more of the same, sort of getting around the country, doing our workshops. So that's not changing at all. It's more of the same. We've had great success over the last 5 years. The portfolio of clients that I've got, especially the guys that are coming back again, pretty much everyone that we've had in our system, we keep in contact with through management of the property and through management of their portfolio. So it's a winning recipe. We're sticking to it. If anything, we want to get our activity up and do more of the same. I just think that, for the guys that are in the position to do something, I've got so much knowledge on how to do it the right way. And also it's not just from what I've read from a book, like I did it the wrong way at the start. Like I learned these lessons, everything that I've learned in property, I've learned the hard way. And that became part of my mission when I started this company. This is why I do the informational workshops. Like I don't have to do them. Like there's enough business coming through referral partners and through just marketing.
But that goes back to it's your community as well.
That's exactly
helping
right.
Young guys.
And it's actually my passion is to help you guys do it the right way, because I've seen so many guys run through the military sort of community and not do it the right way. So, and I'm actually, one of the people that was sucked in and did do it the wrong way. I managed to sort myself out and get back on track and doing really well personally through it all. But, there's so much time and hurt that I can save people. That's why I do what I do, and we're going to keep doing it.
That's so good. I think what's a little bit of tips for someone? Red flag. What's a red flag if they might not be talking to you, but say they've reached out, they've got someone, or they want to go to a preferred agency. What's a red flag when someone's having a conversation with someone in your position?
Sure. So fees, upfront fees. I know that there's a lot of companies out there that pretty much charge people to either attend their webinar or their seminar or have a sit-down workshop, and some of these fees are, thousands of dollars or more. Whereas those guys also get paid, like I do, as a real estate agent would, by the vendor. So there's consultancy fees and all that sort of stuff. If you're sitting down with a property agent, there's two types of agents. There's a buyer's agent who gets paid by yourself, who doesn't get paid by the vendor. And they will go out into the market and look at where to buy, who to buy off. And this is a lot of people who buy residential real estate that's already existing, because they like to buy it and flip houses. They'll renovate them and flip them. So that's called a buyer's agent. That's where you pay the agent a fee for them going out and doing the due diligence. Then there's a real estate agent who you do the due diligence, or you work with an agency, and they get paid by the vendor,
the lister
of the property. Then there's the third type of guys out there that do both.
Mm-hmm.
They pretend to be a buyer's agent, but they're also selling and being paid by the vendor.
That seems a bit...
Yeah, it's double dipping. So there's plenty of guys out there that that sort of target military, young.
Tell the truth, shame the devil.
I can't name names, but there's plenty of guys that go out there and they sort of market towards young people, charge them a big fee to give the same sort of information that we do.
So you don't charge these first? How come you charged me 10 grand for that first meeting we had?
Because we're mates.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and all the rest of the professional services that you need in your financial world. When you buy a property, you're going to need a solicitor for conveyancing, a mortgage broker, potentially a financial planner. You need an agent like myself. You need a rental manager. You shouldn't pay any of those people except for a financial planner and the manager any fees. So if you've got a mortgage broker trying to give you property advice or financial advice charging you fees, I've heard of it. It's rare for a mortgage broker to try and pull this one over you, but they get paid by the bank.
Right.
So you've just got to be really careful when you're reading through your documentation. You need a good solicitor, obviously, and you do need to pay your solicitor. But anytime you do anything, I think a really good, important first step before signing anything is have a solicitor look at anything. I mean, talk about red flag. Anyone who tries to get you to sign a contract without it being read by a solicitor first, and you see other guys in the market doing a show, a seminar or a workshop, and at the end of the night they say, sign here.
Run up the back.
Come up the back. Who wants to invest? Yeah, we all do. And they G up the room, stuff like that. And people are signing contracts on the night without a solicitor being present. Yeah. That's a big one to stay away from. There's plenty of things we could talk about.
The red flag. So I was going to ask, what besides those sort of things, have you come across in your last sort of 5-6 years? What does statistically it look like? The properties that you've been involved with, have you got a pretty good track record? Yeah,
so we've just sent out data packs for everyone who invested in our Sippy Downs project. We've been working with Habitat Development for the last 5 years. It started on stage 1, which was called the Central, and then the York, Hudson, One Tree. There's now we're up to the 6th stage. So all of our investors over that period, we've just sent out our yearly reports to, and the capital growth in that region has been really successful. The reason why we chose that area was all due to infrastructure projects.
Yeah.
If you look around the project, excuse me, there's really good infrastructure. Comes in 2 parts, and I'll get back to answering your question directly in a second. But what's led us to have this great success for our clients is I've always looked for infrastructure, 2 types. Existing infrastructure that's there when they've purchased the property. So Sippy Downs has had a new road out the front of the development, 1 minute to the freeway, 60 minutes to Brisbane, 30 minutes to Noosa. Across the street was one of the biggest Christian colleges on the Sunshine Coast, the university behind it, the airport 10 minutes away, and then Maroochydore and Mooloolaba just down the street. And that was great. That's what attracted the initial tenants, the value of the property at purchase. But the reason why specifically I chose this one is because right next door they were building a Westfields, Coles, it's not a Westfields, but it's a Westfields type big retail precinct with cafes, restaurants, entertainment. The UE head offices, the big international insurance company, opened their head offices just down the street. The airport upgrade, the hospital upgrade, like I said, all that infrastructure with Maroochydore before, it gave us a really good... It was kind of fortuitous. I came across these guys right at the start of starting my business, and I looked at their product and I just thought, this is such a great entry level product. It was 2 and 3 bedroom apartments for between $380 to $420, and now we're doing the 6th stage, and the prices of the next stage have increased dramatically, and that's because the market allows it. So that's obviously bringing up the value of the properties.
Which is a great pitch to new people saying, hey,
it's real results.
To people, that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's actually real results, and Rebecca and I were really happy as we were doing the due diligence. We were doing comparative market assessments of comparable sales in the area, as well as what rents our clients are actually getting. It's all increased. So it was really good to send out the good news just before Christmas. We've already got a couple of those guys who've come back to us after reading their report and going, look, that's great, I'm ready to go again. So
that's really good.
It's worked well.
For those listening, what's a qualifying position? Like, what's realistically these days, hard facts, because some people just aren't in a position to buy yet. They have to work towards it.
Okay.
What's the starting point for someone to invest in, say, that you would have properties to sell?
Sure. I think a really good bracket when we're looking at first-time investors for your first property, somewhere between $350,000 to $450,000.
What sort of income do they need?
80K to 120. You know, that's the sort of, the banks look favourably on that 80,000 to 120. You need to have existing savings, so you need to show pretty strong. If you're going to use a first-tier lender and get a good interest rate, they want to see savings history.
3 months, 6 months?
3 months minimum.
Yep.
So 6 months better, 12 months even better than that. To buy a property or to get a loan, I guess, you mentioned before, back when there was a 5% deposit capped LMI loan, so lender's mortgage insurance was all thrown on top of it. But now APRA has brought in some more stringent rules on lending money. So you need a 10% deposit minimum, so plus costs. So if you were to buy a $400,000 property, you need $40K in the bank for the 10% deposit, about $15,000 for costs, stamp duty, solicitors fees. So
part of that 40 or on top?
On top of. So if you wanted to buy a $400,000 property, you need 60 grand in the bank.
Yep.
With a bit of a buffer. So 60K is a realistic starting point. Have strong, obviously, income. So that's basically it. And I guess I'd say a piece on, if you're looking to borrow money, I think going to a mortgage broker rather than to your existing bank for a few reasons is a good idea. They know they're across all the different lenders, across all the different products. They can go to the market and get you the best rate. People say that they're loyal to their bank. Your bank's not loyal to you. If you foreclose on, if you can't pay your mortgage, they'll take your house. You know. So when we talk about going out in the market and finding where to get money for a loan, after you've done those things and you've got 60 grand in the bank, it's really important to go to a mortgage broker, an independent guy. Again, you don't pay these guys; they get paid by the bank to get your finance done. There's a good point on a thing called cross collateralization as well, which is where rather than have all your eggs in one basket, say you've got 4 investment properties, you wouldn't have them all with the one bank. I wouldn't anyway. This is just general advice, but you wouldn't have them all with the one bank, because then that one bank's got access. If you foreclose on one of your investment properties, they're not going to sort of take that one property and wholesale. They're going to look at which property is the most value to them and which one they can sell quickest, so they could potentially attack your whole anything in your portfolio. Whereas if you got property 1 with St George, 2 with CBA, Westpac and so forth, if one of them's in trouble, that bank can only, at the start, before it gets too complicated, sort of go after that one, that property. So to answer your question, 60K is a great starting point. If you're a young investor who wants to buy your first property, aim for 60K.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So before we sort of wrap this up, I could keep going for a while because I've got a bunch more questions, but we might space it out so we don't overload. We might do another one in a week or so.
Right.
Before we close it out, number one tip for someone who might be, say, burnt in the past or struggling to get started, besides obviously coming to one of your seminars.
Sure.
What's a good tip, like just a friendly bit of advice for someone who wants to invest?
Educate yourself, number one. It's your money. It's your future. Educate yourself. It's not on, if you make a bad decision and you get taken down the garden path by someone, it's your fault.
Okay.
This can't be, there's no, and again, I'm saying this because I did this the wrong way. I just threw some money at someone and let them do it without doing my due diligence on the person, on the property myself, and I didn't educate myself enough before I bought my first property. So it's all about education and making an informed decision, regardless of the advice you're getting. If you're given advice, then you need to research that advice before you sign something.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for educating me today.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
We've actually kept it very tame.
Oh, we have.
We've kept
you looking
professional.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. See you next time.
All right. Thanks, Brodie.